In 1936, an extraordinary event took place in a small northeastern town.
I followed my father was there and asked him what was going on, and he says that the men were going to march to London for work.
That must have been a hell of a thing to do, to walk to London.
200 men decided to embark on a crusade to London.
They were just, I think they were regarded as daft people from the north. They were spat on, there were bricks thrown at them and all kinds in some places.
This is their story. This is the story of the Crusaders. Jarrow is a small northern town located on the outskirts of Newcastle. Once prosperous, this town, like many others, was devastated by the worldwide depression of the 1930s, particularly when the government of the day decided to reduce the shipbuilding programme.
Charles Palmer and his brother George commenced shipbuilding in Jarrow in 1852, and they built no less than 1,007 ships. A culmination of 2 million tonnes, which is phenomenal.
Jarrow was built around its shipyards, which provided the majority of the town with employment. However, in the 1930s, one decision led to a life-changing situation.
At the early 30s, they decided there was no capacity in shipbuilding, so they set up an organisation called the Shipbuilding Security Company, and they went round the land, round the country, closing down shipyards and putting an embargo on the building of ships. Now they come to Jarrow in early 1930s. They closed down the steel works because they used to make their own steel, and then they closed the shipyard down, and that laid tens of thousands of people out of work.
As a result of the closure of the shipyards, Jarrow was faced with 80% unemployment. An unprecedented number of men out of work. Families were starving, and something had to be done.
They came up with the idea that we'll have a march down to London to basically talk about their plight.
The march was organised by the town council, but that's not the whole story. Who thought of the march? There's one account of a council meeting where what was to be done was being discussed, and it was from the public gallery that someone said, let's march down with the petition. So the idea of the petition was there from the council, but the idea to march down it supposedly came from the people of Jarrow themselves. And then another part of the story, obviously, is the role of Ellen Wilkinson, who's the MP for Jarrow, who is one of the most famous left-wing figures of the 1930s, and she was a brilliant advocate for Jarrow. So it's her rhetoric that really left a very strong impression upon the people of Britain. So she described Jarrow as the town that was murdered.
They asked for volunteers, and there was quite a number volunteered, but before they could go, they had to have a medical, and those that passed the medical and were prepared to go were then put down. There was just in excess of 200. The youngest one would be about 18, I believe, and the oldest one was 61.
So it was arranged. On October 5th, 1936, 200 able men gathered in the town, ready to take their plight to the country. They were due to arrive in London on the 31st of October, where they were to lobby Parliament with petitions signed by thousands. Lord Don Dixon was a small boy at the time and remembers witnessing the men leaving the town.
I was about 7-year-old, I believe, at the time, and I seen a crowd of people going towards the town hall, so I went to the top of the street. My father was there and asked him what was happening. He says they're going to have a march to London for work. And I asked a simple question, why don't they bring the work up here where the men are? It'd be a lot easier. And he said it's not as simple as that. So we went along to Wylham Street, that's where the march took place. And I watched the men coming out of the Wylham Street, going to Christchurch to get blessed before they went on, went down to London. and that's what I recall of it.
The march left Jarrow on the 5th of October, and a very considerable momentum had built up. So they'd been campaigning to get petitions signed, so there were 67,000 petitions signed across Tyneside, and then there was another petition within Jarrow of 11,000, and that takes quite a lot of work. You know, people had been campaigning to get this issue raised. So there was a very considerable buzz in Jarrow. If you look at any of the photos of the 5th of October, you know, everybody's out on the streets, you know, sending people off. So I think that you can't go through that and not feel that you're going to get somewhere. It's got to be a moment of great hope and expectation.
With local support, the men left their families behind with little food or money. But with the anticipation of change, the Crusaders began with a 12-mile journey to Chester-le Street. It was arranged that they would stop for food and rest at a further 20 towns before reaching London. It's believed that in these towns the men received universal support.
If you look at the march on its way down to London, the receptions varied very considerably. There's this sense that's often given that the receptions were universally good. It simply wasn't the case.
The fact that people don't realise that they weren't treated with you know, the same everywhere they went as they marched down. As I says, some people welcomed, some people helped them, and a lot of people, but some people didn't. Some people, you know, thought they were a ragtag and bobtail outfit type of thing. But as I say, there was well, I think they went to Nottingham, and I think they got their boots mended for free. I mean, they were practically through the soles of the boots, but it was coloured, if you like, in a lot of ways. They didn't tell you the bad parts about it, and they didn't tell you how they were treated when they actually got there.
Despite not always receiving the support of the passing towns, the men were still optimistic that their march would bring change. Con Shields was working in London at the time and was in contact with his father, a cook on the march. Looking at letters sent to him, we can begin to grasp the spirit of the journey.
Ripon. I believe there's one from Luton. These are letters that my grandfather, Con, wrote home to his son, my dad, Con. As you can see there, 17th of the 10th, 36, 13th, 11th, from Barnsley, and they were addressed to Mr. C. Shields, JPO, Jarrow March, Barnsley, and they were mainly telling you the day-to-day events on the march. Dear son, just a few lines, hoping this letter find you in the pink, as it leaves me the same way. Well, son, I don't know where to start. First, we're having a fine time and very good weather. Well, son, we left Jarrow on Monday, and our first stop was Chester-le Street. And when we got there, the people were fine to us, and we slept in the miners' home on the floor. But you know, we never slept any that night. While we left on the road for Ferry Hill, and we got there was a better welcome as all the town was out. Dear son, just a few lines to let you know I'm keeping well and still going strong. Well, son, we left Leeds on Wednesday for Wakefield, and then the weather was very good, but when we got there, we didn't get the same welcome which we got in the other towns. But never mind, we have to take the good with the bad.
Well, the Crusaders had to put a brave face on it. Part of the publicity battle that they were trying to conduct with the government was to show their popularity, and that the whole of the English nation was behind them, sympathetic to them. So part of it is the way that they played the media message, I think.
They kept the spirits up. The average day's walking was about 13 miles, which was acceptable. It was recognised as an acceptable distance to walk in an 8-hour day. They had a harmonica band, which this kept the men's spirits up, and they played virtually all the way.
With their heads held high, the men drew closer to London. Con was living nearby and had arranged to meet his father and the Crusaders at the end of their journey.
Well, Con, I will be looking for you on Friday. But if you don't make it, I will look out for you on Saturday. And if I miss you, I'll come to where you are. I do not think you'll miss us, and we are meeting all the best people in London. So I think we will have a good time.
I joined them in the Babel Lodge. I joined them there, and I went in there with my father, and went from there to
Whitechapel.
Whitechapel. Yeah. Once you got into that crowd, you knew everybody, see? They were your people. And you immediately fixed in with them. Memory and everything. You were one of them.
Once in London, the men were supported with a mass meeting at Hyde Park, where Ellen Wilkinson delivered a formal speech before presenting the petition to Parliament. After a month of walking, they had finally arrived in the city, ready to meet officials and demand work. However, the response they received was not as they had hoped.
Now, the thing is that they marched all the way to London. Then when they got there with that petition, they took them on a bus ride around London. Nobody would meet them. They were just, I think they were regarded as daft people from the north. We'll show them a few things and they'll enjoy themselves and then shove them back up again. Like. These men had walked through through rain and everything else to get there, and they couldn't be bothered to meet them. Now that to me is nothing short of disgraceful.
Yes, after the petition was accepted by the government, reluctantly accepted, the men were sent back to Jarrow on the train. Back to the street corners where they seemed as though that's where they belonged and that's where they were going to stay for the foreseeable future. The government's attitude was Jarrow should find its own salvation.
You would believe men could cry, but they did. They were just ignored, more or less ignored. In fact, Baldwin, I think, was Prime Minister. He was not another march, you know. It was terrible, the reception I got. Really was very bad.
Well, nobody cared. It's easy as that. You can sum it up with that. Nobody cared.
The march had not resulted in employment. However, with the outbreak of war, the demand for shipbuilding increased, and some of the work returned to Jarrow. Despite this, the town still relied on the support of the nation.
Surrey adopted Jarrow, and they set up a fund where they raise money and give it to people in Jarrow, and youngsters got free boots, people got free wallpaper and paint to do the house out of the Surrey fund, and I can recall getting a pair of boots, and what they'd done was they punched the back of the boots so that your parents couldn't pawn them. Things were pretty rough at the time.
The personal sacrifice of the Crusaders and their families in 1936 had achieved nothing. Or had it? The march is today seen as a defining moment in British history and is believed to have been central to the subsequent development of the welfare state of Britain. The pride and dignity, not just of the men, but of the whole town, will never be forgotten.
We're here at this state talking about it, and it took place in 1936 and we're still talking about it.
There was strong-willed, proud men.
You've got to be proud of that, haven't you? Huh? You've got to be proud of that.